You're listening to Your Magical Midlife. This podcast is for women who are seekers, dreamers, and unconventional thinkers. If you're a Gen X woman who's always walked your own path, but now feel like you've lost your way, listen up. I'm Kate Higgins, your host. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and coach, and I'm here to guide you back to yourself and to help you reconnect with your joy, your passion, and your purpose. Midlife knocked me sideways. I was not prepared for all the challenges that piled up one by one. Everything in my life felt like it was imploding, including my health and my sense of self. By the time I hit 50, I was completely lost. But here's the good part. I'm finding my way, and so can you. I'll be dropping episodes every Thursday on everything from ambivalent aging, to body changes, to relationship shifts, to career challenges, financial fears, crazy family dynamics, and spiritual awakenings. Some weeks I'll be musing, some weeks I'll be ranting, and sometimes I'll have amazing guests who will share their expertise with you. Midlife brings a lot of change and a lot of challenges, but there's also so much magic to be uncovered. Let's dive in. MJ Murray Vachon is a licensed clinical social worker and certified EMDR therapist. She works with individuals, couples, and families for over 36 years. She has an amazing podcast called Inner Challenge and has also transitioned to midlife coaching, creating a beautiful program called Creating Midlife Calm. Today we have an amazing conversation about the difference between therapy and coaching and how to create really good foundation of self-care. This morning.
I'm great.
You are shifting into coaching for women?
I've always done both.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool.
I don't really advertise the coaching in a funny kind of way. So I really have two hats. I have a mental wellness program called Inner Challenge. And then I have a private practice, which is just where I see clients. Like you, I'm an LCSW.
Yeah.
And so I take insurance.
Yeah.
And then I also have the podcast. So my first podcast was connected to my mental wellness program. It was called Inner Challenge. I retooled that in the summer, and now it's called Creating Midlife Calm. And that is really a synthesis of both of things that I do. And I'm making a gradual transition to is coaching. I always have pretty much had 10 coaching clients. Wow. And they're former clients who come back, not weekly, some, I think there's a couple that are weekly, but they have fairly high positions, like they're CEOs, presidents, and they pretty much come back for coaching when it comes to relational issues in the workplace.
Yeah.
So does that make sense?
Somebody who's been a clinician for a long time, who is myself, who is transitioning into coaching from that traditional psychiatric model, I'm finding I'm having a hard time differentiating to people and also for myself.
Yes.
The work I'm doing feels pretty much the same. How do you see the differentiation between coaching and therapy?
I see therapy as reparative. People are often going into their past or perhaps into their present, repairing themselves from sometimes trauma, sometimes bad choices, sometimes addiction, sometimes all of the above.
Right.
I see coaching as someone who has actually done that work, because there's very few people who can get to midlife. I see midlife really as like 30 to like mid 60s to 70, given that people can live to be 80 and 90.
Sure.
But so, therapy is repairing. And I see coaching as really looking toward the future with who you are and what you've developed, your own skill sets, and trying to make it better.
That's so succinct.
If people don't have good self-care, they're not really ready for coaching. I have actually and do supervise a number of coaches. And so this is not, as you know, because you're asking, I think, a wise question. We don't have an agreed upon definition of the two nationwide.
Right.
And I fall into the camp that really doesn't think that adolescents and people in their 20s fit the coaching model very often. Because my foundation for coaching is, how's your self-care? And I have a self-care program that's pretty clear and easy. You get enough sleep, do you get enough exercise, do you eat well enough? I'm not a perfectionist, so it's all a pretty average bar.
Yeah.
Can you manage technology? And do you have, coping skills? And when you can do that, and when you've healed from past traumas, so you're not in the present talking about your past, then you're probably ready for coaching. Yeah. With that said, none of us, our past issues do resurface all through our life. And so there is a flexibility in coaching where I have a woman who I coach, very high level woman, and I hadn't heard from her for a while. And she called me and she said, I'm back to smoking a bunch of pot. And that's not going to cut it in my job. And, you would relate to this. She really was grieving. Her mother had dementia and she was grieving. And it was such a new level of grief that she really used coaching to do what I would say is really this next round of therapy work.
Yeah.
So there's a gray area, but that's how I look at it.
Yeah. Speaking of gray area, and I don't want to get super controversial because people are so critical on the internet, but I do want to pick your brain on this. As I've been making this transition and looking at other people who coach, there are so many people who claim this, they are often young.
Yes.
And they claim this expertise on coaching people through trauma. And all I can think of is somebody who's worked in a psychiatric emergency room, inpatient psych, adolescent psych, all those really serious, with really, really sick people, with people who had real big problems. I think how dangerous is this? Yeah. How dangerous is this person putting themselves in? How would they feel? They take on somebody who has severe trauma and they don't even know what they're taking on when they take it on. And then they get in there and it's childhood sexual abuse. It's cutting. It's self-injury. I get very anxious when I see people with no license claiming to be trauma coaches. And I don't know. What do you think of that? You do EMDR.
First 10 years were all trauma.
Yeah.
That's all I worked in. I did in-home therapy in really the worst neighborhoods in Chicago. You had to have a triple diagnosis, and sexual abuse was always the first. So I feel like you do. Because I've been in the same community for a long time, I'm well known. We have 2 schools of social work here. It's not unusual for young students to call me and to say, could I talk to you? And many of them will say to me, I want a career doing what you're doing, because I have this really fun mental wellness program that I've gotten to do a lot of things with. I have a podcast, I have, clients, and I remind them, I'm at almost year 39. Yeah. I've had 49,000 hours in the chair. I've had a lot of failures, but I started out in the trenches doing really hard work with people who knew what they were doing. And so my reaction is there are no shortcuts. Having supervised a number of life coaches who were making the transition, one of the things that they learned was who they could take and who they couldn't take. Yeah. You can't life coach addictions. You can't life coach trauma. And many of them found that out very quickly. But I made mistakes when I was learning. People will make mistakes when they're learning. And I think so much of being a therapist is being open to the mistakes we made and having supervision to turn. And so I just think people don't stay with therapists who don't help them feel better. And they certainly don't stay with coaches, because most of my clients don't pay more than $30 for copays. But people in the coaching world, they might pay $100, they might pay $150. Some people pay $250. If they don't see progress after 2 or 3 sessions, they just don't continue. So I, for the most part, have a lot of confidence that people will weed out inexperienced people.
Yeah. I like that answer. Thank you. That's really, again, really clear, really succinct. It's a growing field. Coaching is a growing field, and it's very muddy. It's unrestricted, and it seems like a lot of people are attracted to it because you don't need that master's degree. You don't even necessarily need the certification. You could literally turn around and create a website today saying that you're a coach.
There is a boatload of people, I should say, who are coaching from their own life experience.
Yes.
And I have not found my clients to really care about my own life experience. They are there for me to really be present to them, to think about their life through a professional lens that has been educated and trained and retrained and then trained again and had my own supervision and my own therapy. And so I do feel like the life coaches that I've supervised, you know, two of them started off with their own experience and very quickly found out that people are quite different. And what works for me isn't going to work for you. And people don't really care about my experience. So that seems to sort itself out in time.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk to me about the woman you are speaking to at this juncture of your career. The woman that you are, I assume it's a midlife woman. Is it mostly women, or do you also see men?
I also see men. About almost 40% of my caseload is men, and it always has been. I've always worked extremely well with men. I've always worked extremely well with women. I come from a family of 6 kids, and I come from a neighborhood where the boys and the girls played together every single day, and that, I think, trained me well. And I love that fact that for whatever reason, I can work with both genders and everybody in between on the continuum. Because as you know, because you're a therapist, once I start working with someone, that kind of dissolves. And who they are becomes so much more than their race, their sexual orientation, their gender. And so who I'm working with at this point is my youngest client is 14. My oldest client is 86.
Oh.
And I have people who are very progressive, people who are very liberal, people who are very religious, people who are atheist. It's just the mix that I have is very interesting. And I do believe it's because when I was a younger therapist, I worked with people very different than myself. And in community mental health, I didn't get to choose who I worked with. And so a lot of my biases, a lot of my fears were just gently worked out of me. And I actually work a lot with immigrants now. And that was something I had not done. But my son married into a family who immigrated. And that, again, broadened my heart, broadened my lens of how I see the world. And that's been helpful to those families and individuals. So it's a pretty broad, it's, South Bend, Indiana. So I'm in smack dab in Midwest. And we gave you Peter Buttigieg and we gave you Amy Coney Barrett. And that's the tension and the energy in this city that is pretty interesting.
Yeah. As far as your coaching that you're doing now for people in midlife, not just, presumably not just women.
Right.
What kinds of things, what kind of challenges do you see people bumping up against now?
I have a niche for people who have family businesses, who are in leadership positions and have to figure out how to navigate spouses and siblings in that leadership role. I have a niche for women who are incredibly successful, but have chosen to not, much like yourself, have chosen to not have children and now find themselves in their 50s and 60s and trying to figure out, how do I create the life I want when my siblings and my peers are living pretty differently than I'm living? And I have a niche for people who are in career transition. The nurse who becomes a realtor, and people who, because of midlife exploration, have often decided to take really big risks. And that's where I think coaching can be really helpful. Super stable person, talented person. They have a really developed set of skills, but they want to jump off the high dive. And they want to do it in a way that's not wishful. They want to be informed. They want to be prepared. They want to move to this next life dream in a way that is grounding.
Yeah. I think there's something to be said about the physical transition of perimenopause and menopause and andropause, which is men's process, that does something to our brain chemistry that makes us evaluate and want to make those big, brave leaps at this juncture of our lives. I think it's actually like a biological imperative to get to that crossroad and have that chemical, hormonal shift and be like, okay, so I built this. Do I like it? Do I hate it? Is it okay? What can I take with me as I move forward? What do I want to abandon? What worked? What didn't work? Do you find that's true with the people you're working with as well?
I do. And this is really my like third generational cohort to move through menopause.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was 30, I had a woman in her late 50s who came and was so angry at her husband. And she's like, I can't sleep at night. I'm just angry all the time. And he just really sounded like a son of a bitch. And I mean, it's not my place to say run or stay.
Right.
But I said, I'd like you to go get a consult with this fantastic psychiatrist that I worked with, because she really was so depressed, so unhappy. And he called me and he said, good referral, but I don't think we're looking at a psychiatric issue. She's in menopause. Well, when you're 30, that's like the moon.
Yeah.
And that would have been a terrible mistake had I followed her mood to a psychological end.
Right.
When it was actually physiological. And that's one of the things I really look at all the time, because we have moved to a culture that psychologizes everything.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just physiological. And I think the blessing of menopause, because there's a lot of curses, is it gives women, for the first time, permission to stop and look at themselves.
Yeah. Because you have to.
You have to. You will be so sleep deprived, so angry, and it gives women a chance to reset their self-care. So I'm a big fan of menopause. I'm a big fan because women are carrying the brunt of caretaking. They are carrying us in the workplace. By God, Taylor Swift carried the economy for a summer.
Yeah.
And when menopause comes, and perimenopause, because I have a lot of women in their 40s who can already feel the changes happening. I think it's this twisted gift of, let's really figure out how you can get sleep. Can you look at how you can increase your nutrition a bit without feeling deprived? Can you just get a walk in at lunch? All those basic things that people know, but are hard to fit in when everybody else is screaming, I need you, I need you, I need you. But menopause, I think, does allow us to stop. It certainly did me. And it certainly does most of my clients, and say, I have to figure out how to feel better. And
Yeah.
I think along with that comes really what I said about your podcast of having the guts in midlife to look at regrets.
Yeah. Because it is really, you can't have everything, right? You
Right.
can't. Like, we're told you can, but you really can't.
Yes.
And
it makes a beautiful poster, but it makes us pissed at ourselves.
oh yeah. It makes you feel like you're constantly wrong.
Yeah.
If you hold up that belief. And I was very surprised. It sounds so silly saying it out loud, but when I hit my mid 40s, I was surprised by how quickly 25 to 45 went. It went so fast. And now that I'm 54, I feel like the last decade went even faster. And it's very easy to look around at everybody else and compare yourself unfavorably and not know what the hell you were doing when everyone else was building enough wealth to buy a second home, go here, go there. Everybody else was raising children, just I don't even know what I was doing. I was working. I was doing a lot of things, but it just all went so quickly. And I felt I was really, really unprepared.
Yeah. I mean, I think the older we get, the faster it goes because we have less years left.
Yeah.
And I often think when we have a holiday, oh, I might have 20 of these left. That's not very many. That's not very many. And so I think with that overwhelming sense of, wow, look how fast it's going, comes the invitation, if people want to choose, to be more intentional, to stop and to pause, to use your word, and to say, what do I really want for these next 5 years? What do I want for these next 10 years? And not want necessarily in a material way, but want in an internal way. How do I want to develop myself as a person? How do I want to give my talents to other people? Goals materially are pretty easy to meet because people tend to be fairly realistic by midlife. Like, I know I am not going to have a second house. That's not in the cards, right? We don't have the income for that. But also, I don't really want to clean a second house. So I think people in midlife, they know themselves so much more and they're a lot less wishful.
Right.
And so it is a time to stop and to pause and to contemplate, how do I feel about my life? And as you so beautifully said, regrets will surface. And I think that's why people stop. It's like the regrets surface and then it's like, oh, it's too painful. I'll just scroll on my phone.
Yeah. It's very easy to get stuck in anxiety. And what I tell myself is I had a lot of anxiety my whole life, right? But I don't have time to be anxious anymore. Like, I got shit I want to do. I have things I want to accomplish.
Yes.
And to put it down and stop, I think, like, running away from all the busyness in my head and get focused. I don't think I'm alone with that. Or you just scroll on your phone, right? Either you make that decision like, okay, enough is enough. Or like your client who woke up one day and hated her husband, right? Like, either that was probably a slow burn, right? All the way to that point. You get to this point and you're like, okay, do I like this? Or is it time to make a left turn, a right turn, a U-turn, whatever it is?
I think what's really hard is when we're younger, for those who go to college, there is permission to be curious. There is permission in that life stage of college where the main question people ask is, who am I? There's permission to dream and to say, I want to be a nurse, or I want to be a doctor, or I want to be an Indian chief, whatever is the dream. And then life happens. And that type of reflection and contemplation, people often don't build into their life. But it is really necessary. And I think the reason people don't build in is because when we sit down to journal, or we go on a walk without earbuds in, or we go to coffee with a friend and to talk about real things, often what surfaces is anxiety. And if we can befriend it, my emotional regulation model, all therapists probably have one, but I've created my own, is tend and befriend. And that we have to do our internal work. But in our culture, the culture teaches an external mindset in navigating emotions, and that's blame and unclaim. So most people do go through much of their life, and maybe all of their life, like feeling an uncomfortable emotion and unclaiming it by scrolling on their phone or having a glass of wine or blaming it. I shouldn't feel anxious, but you did this. But I have not ever had any success with controlling people outside of myself. And I've never had clients who've had success. So when we decide, oh, all this is kind of messy, but inside I can learn to create calm.
Yeah.
Inside I can tend to befriend whatever feeling surfaces and let that feeling, maybe in this case, regret, be a teacher, not a problem. But people, there's this really nice piece of information from neuroscience. We feel an uncomfortable feeling like anxiety. There's neurochemicals that are released and they last for about 90 seconds. And I knew this before neuroscience was even invented because when I had someone on my couch, next to it was a clock with a second hand. And I was teaching them, ground your feet, find your anxiety on your body, put your hands there. This is like 1988. And just breathe. And just imagine it moving through you. And what I saw was again and again, they were done within 90 seconds.
Wow.
But what happens, it typically, like when people are learning to do this, at about 60 seconds, they would stop and they're like, I can't do this. And I'm like, just do 30 seconds more. And that piece of fact from neuroscience is so comforting because when it starts, we think that the anxiety is going to go on forever, which it cannot go on forever. The body's not built for that. I do understand that sometimes the anxiety for some people go to a panic attack, but that's we have a lot of anxiety that does not go to a panic attack. That's a whole different episode. But in this case, if in midlife, if people can have, let's say, regret and the sadness and the anxiety, and they just let themselves honor it, that's so brave. Like that episode of yours, I listened to it twice back to back. I was like, this woman is so effing brave. I'm just going to send her an email and say, like, beg her to let me be on her podcast because everyone needs this. Everyone needs people to say, I'm taking a pause. My father's died. I didn't expect it to be as big a deal as it is, which is how we all go through it because, like, we got to go through it.
Yeah.
And I'm wiped out. I'm going to take a pause. I was like, go for it, girl. And then you came back and you're like, wow, this is a big deal. And it surfaced regrets.
Yeah. I was very, very taken aback by it because my dad and I didn't have a close relationship.
Yeah.
And he was very troubled. And so when he died, it brought up all this stuff about the home I was raised in. And if I had had more loving, more support, more acceptance even, like who could I have been? If my parents' marriage wasn't so deeply unhappy, if there hadn't been so much fighting, if there hadn't been so much screaming, if I hadn't been like desperate to get out of there when I was 18 and flew out of there like I was on fire and lived this sort of craziness in my 20s and 30s, who would I have been if I had been raised in a home where I was told that I mattered, that I was smart, that I could do things? I would be a completely different person. But I also like who I am now.
Yeah.
Well, like, what do you do with that? That's why the women that I am looking to help now are women who have kind of had these very rebellious lives who now get to this reckoning at menopause, like, oh crap, I don't really have a conventional family. I don't have a conventional partnership. I don't own a home. I don't have any stability. Like, where am I going to end up when I'm 80? Like, am I going to be in a homeless shelter? Am I going to be on the street? That's why I want to build community for people who's like, who've off-roaded their whole.
Yes. And needed to find shelter because their childhoods were full of trauma. And that one of the things I hear you saying is your dad's death gave you permission to be more honest.
Yeah.
About how turbulent your childhood was. And honesty is so painful because we all have our dad and then we all have dad. And that's the dad that we know we deserved. And some people get that and other people don't.
Yeah.
And so when dad dies, whether you had this dad or this dad, there's a reckoning. And that reckoning, which is such a powerful word, it begins with R. It's not WREA unless you choose to just go into the abyss of blaming and unclaiming. That's what the culture teaches. My dad was a son of a bitch. My dad harmed me. And that could be a fact. In court, my client who had that experience would probably win. But if someone's 45 or 50 or 55 or 60, the reckoning is, how do I grieve? I didn't get this dad. But how do I own all that I got because of this dad? What came out of the pain? what came out of the suffering, the resilience, the ability to be flexible and adapt, the ability to read people who are not healthy and get the hell away from them. Maybe after years of being drawn to them, because there's often a lot of reenactments that go on when people grow up in trauma. They keep wanting to try to make somebody better than they are.
Right.
But there's so much power, no matter if your dad is this kind of dad or this kind of dad. My experience, when people lose their parents, it is one of the 2 times that they are the most open to growth. And so I say carpe diem, seize the day and reckon with it.
Yeah. Clearly, you're an amazing therapist.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Practice helps.
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of work do you like to do? Like, which parts of therapy do you like to translate to the people you coach? Like, which skills? The somatic stuff, because you demoed this exercise of just waiting 30 seconds more, feeling it in your body, breathing through it. Do you do that somatic work with your coaching clients? Do you do some form of, I'm sure you don't do EMDR in coaching, but I do tapping, which I do.
Yes, I do tapping.
Yeah.
I'm the 5th of 6 children. So if I wanted a cookie, I had to have tenacity because the cookies went really fast in my house. And I love for people to feel better. I just love it. I've worked with a man for a couple years who has an anger issue, and he really has felt very justified in being angry. And, he has a hard life. He has a very challenging life. But anger is poison, especially when you turn it on the people you live with and you turn it on yourself. If you want to go out and protest the government, that's anger that's rooted in social justice. But anger within the home is never rooted in love. It's rooted in, I'm mad that people aren't doing it my way. So it's selfish anger. And he's made a lot of progress, but I've never been able to get his perspective to turn that it is not his inherent right to be angry at home, because he has a lot of pressure outside of home and he can't show it there. And I just have kept trying and kept trying and kept trying. And in session this week, I think we got it.
Wow.
I didn't touch his past. I just said, go to the future to who you want to be without the anger. So I'm a slow learner, but I kept in the ring trying. Didn't judge him. It's very easy as a woman to jump on the bandwagon about men and anger. But I see him as a person. I don't really see him as a man. And so, in my coaching work, it's always informed by my therapy work. And so I don't do EMDR in coaching because these people aren't in coaching to be repaired. But I do teach tapping. And I really teach the skill of mental movie. Like, I had a president of a company who needed to let go of a longtime employee. Very hard to do. And he's avoided this for about 18 months. And I just said, I just want you to run the mental movie of sitting with her and telling her. And in EMDR, we do things 3 times. Do it again, add more, do it again, add more. And when he was done, he was like, I think she's ready to move on too. Like he was so self-focused on her thinking she was he would be mean, that just doing the mental movie relaxed him. But so, with coaching, they really go back and forth. But I don't, if somebody in coaching says to me, I just remembered, I was, hit with a frying pan by my parents, then I'd be like, oh, that's a therapy issue.
What is your toolkit for self-care? What do you impart to both your therapy clients and your coaching clients? If you could speak specifically to people in midlife who have all the turbulence of caring for aging parents, caring for their kids, trying to get ready to retire, trying everything that the body nonsense, like all the things that happened happen in midlife, what is like the most essential or the couple of things that everyone needs to be doing or should be considering, or I'm not asking this clearly. What is the toolkit that you would give someone in midlife who's going through all the changes?
Well, I would first start by asking them what they know they're doing well. People overfocus on their self-care that they're not doing well. And I've had people sit in front of me who will say to me, I'm 75 pounds overweight. I'm terrible at self-care. And I'm like, okay, we'll get there. What are you doing right? That same person could be sleeping 7.5 hours a day, right? And so as I said earlier, the model that I use is one I've created and I call it nests. Like, are you taking care of your nest? Nutrition, exercise, sleep, technology, and stress coping skills. And by looking at what someone is doing right, that tells me more about them than what they're doing wrong. Because when we lean into what we enjoy, what we lean into what we like, we then have tools to figure out the stuff we don't like. Okay. So that's always where I start. And if people are interested, I have podcasts on this I can send you a link on creating midlife calm. But then I have them go to the one that bothers them the most. If in those 5 areas, what's the one that causes your inner critic to be really mean to yourself? And in all honesty, for most women, it's weight and it's nutrition. And so we'll just have a conversation about, give me your history with weight. What have you tried that's worked? What have you tried that hasn't worked? And I start really simple. And that is, can you eat breakfast? Because we have lots of research that shows that midlife women don't eat breakfast while they're giving their kids breakfast. They're not giving it to themselves. And that if they can just as a ritual every morning, give themselves something. It can be a banana. Like I'm not saying you need to cook French toast because I'm so practical. Like, because I see teenagers, years ago, one of my clients said to me, everybody knows I see you. I said, no, this is confidential. He goes, well, not everybody. But another kid came up to me and they said he walked by my car and he saw a bag of apples and granola bars because that's what another client had. And we talked and we're like, that's from working with MJ, right? So all I care is that you eat something that's healthy. I don't care if you cook it. And so I start that small. And what I say is small changes that you do for 2 weeks, day in and day out, are very empowering. And that's how we build any change. We don't build change, I want to lose 50 pounds. We build change by, I'm going to stop the weight gain. And then I'm going to go from there. And so I'm really practical. And I try to help people, exercise. There's a lot of people, they don't have time to go to a gym, but they can do 5 flights of stairs at lunch, or they can go out for a 15-minute walk. So I just start with what people can do that isn't expensive and that they can fit into their life. You have to take your child to practice. You can do your walk around the soccer field. And it's just that midlife is so crushing. Those simple things people don't often think about.
Right.
And that's what I try to do. So what's the most important thing in self-care? 1 is to notice what you're doing and keep it up.
Yeah.
2 is to pick one thing and just make a minor change and hold it for 2 weeks. See how it feels. You might need another 2 weeks until you've really gotten it established. And then choose another. Okay, now it's really important to drink water. Oh my gosh. People should drink half their body weight in water a day. And that helps people sleep better. That actually helps people make better choices when it comes to food.
Yeah, I think that we're kind of programmed to think that we have to make big sweeping changes, like really dramatic changes. And I love that you encourage your clients to do small, doable, consistent, reasonable things.
Yes.
Not
We can't do big changes. I hate to say it. We'll find an exception to that rule. But most of us, myself included, can do little changes.
Yeah. For you, and I don't want to put you on the spot with a personal question that you may not want to answer. What was your biggest surprise in midlife? Was there anything that knocked you for a loop?
Yeah, because we all envision what it will be like ahead. I love to work. I also loved raising my kids. And I said no to a lot of work opportunities because my kids were my priority. And I said no again and again and again. There's always a tension. Anybody doing both understands it. And I thought in my 50s, I am going to kick ass. I'm going to say no a lot to work opportunities so I can raise my children the way that feels congruent and in alignment for me. And then in my 50s, it is my time. And then in my 50s, my dad got cancer. And I lived in the same town. And so that was a 3 or 4 year process. And then my mom was widowed. And I was helping her. And before I knew it, the pandemic happened. That's, was what it was. My mom was 90. And I checked in on her most days and got her medicines and took her places and helped her with her grief. And she'd gotten sick. And before I knew it, I was 62. Yeah. And all those years had been taken up working. My kids lived out of town and taking care of my parents who were sick. And then my son and his wife had our first grandchild, and they had no daycare. So then for a year, the 4 grandparents commuted a week a month to be the daycare.
Oh, wow.
And so it was fantastic. I mean, who doesn't love a baby? But it wasn't about me. The 2 things that shocked me is how much support my children still needed in their mid-20s. Because in the model that I grew up in, graduated from college and figure it out. But it's a much harder world. It's much more unstable. And one of the things I was really fortunate about, a Notre Dame professor who was wise enough to invite the mental wellness camp to the junior high, I'd run into him. He had 2 kids, 10 years older than mine. And I said, his kids were in their early 30s. Mine were in their early 20s, still in college. I said, what was the most surprising thing about parenting your kids in their 20s? He goes, that they still need a lot of support. They don't need you to enable them. But it's not like this, like I think it was for my parents.
Oh, my parents too. It was very clear that, I mean, of course they were like, of course we'll always love you and we'll always help you. And they did. But it was also this very clear message that I think Gen X is the last one to get, that when you're 21, you're no longer a child. And now adolescence extends like practically to 40.
Well, and what becomes, I think, a burden for a midlife parent is to figure out what support helps the child grow into independence and what support enables the child. Actually, one of my favorite podcast episodes I did was my very first one. I think it's episode 14, because the first 13 are just from my mental wellness program. But I interviewed a woman who her adult daughter was calling her very distressed. And we really talked about how to support the daughter and not enable the daughter. And she was a phenomenal guest and really entered into the process. So I think that's a really hard part of midlife parenting, in that everything is different. It's so much more expensive to live. But mostly, children grow up in hyper-competitive environments. So they don't have the community and the sense of collaboration that I grew up with. I had a lot of friends, and I wasn't competing. I have a lovely client. She's a senior in high school, and she was an athlete, got injured. Her best friend, she also got injured later, like a year later. And she said, we're competing with each other about whose injury is the worst. And if you really hang out with adolescents, and if you really work with college students like I do, it isn't collaborative. They look at, oh, that person is skinnier than me. That person is faster than me. That person has better grades than me. And that was not something that really was part of the mindset when I was a kid or in college. It was about community. It was about collaboration. And the stakes weren't so high. College wasn't so expensive.
Yeah, it does seem that way. Before I moved to Florida, I lived in a very wealthy neighborhood. I lived on the outskirts in a rent stabilized apartment in Brooklyn, and I was just shocked at the generational difference of what parents expected of their children.
Yes.
I was happy to literally play in the dirt, go
Yes.
outside, find my own entertainment,
Yes.
And these kids are so scheduled. They're learning Mandarin. I mean, this child is 4 years old. Why do they need to learn Mandarin? Their parents are already trying to set them up for success at Harvard, and they're tiny, teeny. The pressure is crazy.
Yes. And I think your example that you were happy to play in the dirt, I often think that we went from a model that assumed that children like weeds would grow to a model where, as adults have become more sophisticated, their children have become their projects.
God, so true.
And it's really hard. Like, that's not a judgment. I had 2 children who were very successful. I did not have them in any scheduled activities till they were 7. I had been working for 10 or 12 years before I had kids. I didn't want to fall into that trap. But I saw my kids in high school, like overachieving, not sleeping. I would say to my son, I don't care if you get all A's. I just want you to go to bed. But I can't wrestle a 17-year-old into bed. And for the first time ever, and I think this really is probably Gen X on down, the culture is stronger than the family.
Ooh, that's really hard to reckon, because if you don't have the foundation of support in your family, if the culture is bigger, and it is, if kids are learning more from TikTok or wherever else that they go now that I'm too old to know about, I'm sure it's something else.
Yeah.
If they're learning getting most of their social cues from other kids and not really at home, that's a really hard way to grow up.
Yeah. And we have a really unhealthy culture.
We do.
We have a culture that, in order for the economy to buzz along, needs a lot of us to be addicted to unhealthy food, to our phones, to alcohol, to pot.
Oh, pot's everywhere.
And yeah, the day that Michigan legalized pot, when I was still at the junior high with my program, it was a big deal. And I said to the 8th graders, I'm giving you a quiz. And the quiz was, Michigan is legalizing pot, A, because studies have shown that there is not much harm in using pot. B, because it would be a good economic stimulus for the economy. 3, because the residents of Michigan voted in order to legalize it. The number two answers were A and C, that there's no harm and people voted for it. But the truth was, it's just an economic stimulator. We didn't even have research that really understood how pot affected people. We had lots of anecdotal things, but I often refer people to Huberman's podcast, which is like October 2021 on cannabis. Like, my experience in my office is, for most people under 40, the first thing I have to do is help them with their phone use to get it under 2 hours. And the second thing I have to do is help them live without using pot 2 or 3 times a day. Because long-term use of pot, we now know, increases anxiety, increases depression, and causes stomach issues.
Stomach issues? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a very long medical word that I can't remember what it is. But my closest friend is an ER doc. And what they do when somebody comes in with severe stomach pain is they put them in a shower. Because people will often not be honest about how much pot they're smoking. And the pot of today is really strong. It's not like the pot of 1970s. And so if their pain subsides, they know that this is a cannabis-related stomach issue.
Oh, wow. Is that
And it can be crippling. I probably get 2 to 3 calls a month of desperate mothers whose kids go to one of the 5 colleges in this town, whose children are just crippled by these stomach issues. And the doctors think it's in their head and they're looking for therapy. And, sometimes I have an opening and I take them, and they're usually using pot 3 or 4 times a day.
Wow. And is it from smoking it, from vaping it, or from
All of the above.
All of it, the drops, the gummies, all of it?
I can't say with authority on drops or gummies. It can be through smoking and vaping for sure. But I think, if I'm correct, it's actually our gut biome is just trashed as a culture, and pot does not help that.
Yeah. Do you find that a lot of the people you see in midlife are also like overusing scrolling?
Yes.
Do you think like wine moms have become weed moms? Do you think weed is now mama's little helper?
Yes. I think that if we zoom out 40,000 feet, no judgment.
Yeah.
Right. That we are what the culture needs, even if it's bad for us.
Yeah.
There was a time when alcohol was about half of an aisle in a grocery store. It's 5 aisles now. And that's because we are not making many dishwashers. We are not making cars all here. It's a global economy, and people can make things a lot cheaper in other countries. So we sell a lot more services and a lot of products like alcohol. The phone, it's an economic stimulator. And at the same time, some people say we have an attention economy where they are grabbing our attention all the time. And I think people don't look at all of this through that lens of, this is what the economy is luring you into, and you have a choice. And at this point, when people want to work with me, whether it's in coaching or whether it's in therapy, I tell them that I will ask them to check their phone use at the beginning of every session, because it's all on our phones.
Right.
And in my intakes, since I've started tracking people's intakes from 2015 until now, I have only had one person show a phone use under 2 hours. Most people are somewhere between 4 and 6. And the good news about that is, if your phone use is 4 to 6 hours a day, and everybody likes to say, well, I'm just listening to music in the background, but you can scroll down and you can see, no, you're actually on TikTok for 2 hours. Like, you can lie, but don't lie to yourself. And so, but it's great news, because this is super fixable. And that means that you probably have time to work out. You probably have time to clean your house. And you probably have time to take a walk while you're on your phone. I'm a twofer. Anything if you love your phone and you're listening to podcasts, I listen to a lot of podcasts. You can walk and listen to a podcast. You can do some of the things you want to get done while you're listening. And so, I really start with the phone, and then I start with sleep.
Yeah.
I don't really start with, how was your mom and dad with you as a child? Because if we don't get all these economic things that surround us, that lead us to addiction, that lead us to an unhealthy life, if we don't get them right-sized, I'm not like, sell your phone. God, I love my phone. But we have to just right-size them. Then we don't get to have the kind of life we want. We actually are being led around by the kind of life other people want for us, so they can make a ton of money off of us.
Absolutely. That's so smart. I think, to kind of sum up what you said, the new foundation for wellness is, the new basics are, how much time do you spend scrolling? How much time do you spend checking out with weed or alcohol or something else? And how much time do you spend like getting the basics of sleep and nutrition?
Yeah.
So Nest, remind me what Nest is. Nutrition,
exercise, sleep, technology management, and stress, coping skills for stress.
I love it. I'm going to drop all of your links in the show notes. I really appreciate you coming on. This has been a fantastic conversation about self-care. It extends to everyone, not just people in midlife. So
Can I say one more thing in closing?
Oh, yeah.
One of my I think she's about 47, client said to me, she's done such a beautiful job in this area of self-care. And when she got her sleep right-sized and, she was getting 7 hours a night, feeling like a whole new person, she said, God, sleep is a skill set. And then from sleep, she went on to nutrition. And she just made a couple modifications, right, that made a big difference. Like she fed herself breakfast. She gave her a snack at 3 because she was overeating. And she did what the body begs us to do. We'll just say my episodes on sleep are very helpful. But the body needs us to stop eating after dinner because it needs 12 hours of uninterrupted time to repair and restore our organs. So after that, she's like, God, like, this is like just another skill set. She gets all the way through and she said to me, God, I'm doing life on my own. I said, what do you mean? She goes, before I just went from one substance to another. I had to have coffee the minute I get up. Now I'm drinking coffee. I'm a big lover of coffee, but I don't need it. I just love it. She's like, and then I was like, I had to be so thin, so I wasn't eating breakfast. And then I just was so stressed, I was popping a gummy. She goes, for the first time that I can remember, I am doing life as my own human, and it feels fantastic. And that's what I want to say to people. Like, hey, have a glass of wine, have a gummy, but not to cope.
Right.
Have it because like you would a cookie, where you're just enjoying it. The body is meant for hard shit. We can go through terrible grief. We can go through lots of anxiety of like, oh, will this work out? We're wired to do that. And we're always numbing it. We're always blunting it. We're always blaming or unclaiming. And I think people get so much energy from figuring out like, oh my God, I can do life myself. Doesn't mean I don't have friends. It doesn't mean I don't ask for help. But I ask for help from real people in real time. Not the phone, not a substance.
And not ChatGPT.
And not chat, yeah.
I see people like using ChatGPT as like a quasi-therapist, which is another conversation for another time.
Yeah, I'm actually playing around with that a lot with some of my clients in a healthy way. Moderation, everything in moderation, including ChatGPT.
Yeah. Thank you. This has been so illuminating. This has been
thanks.
And I'll have you on again. I'll put everything in the show notes.
Well, good luck in your transition. It's very exciting and it's very brave, but you're right to do it. You've got the experience. So
thank you very much.
Thank you so much for listening to Your Magical Midlife. I'm Kate Higgins, your host. You can follow me on Instagram at Your Magical Midlife, and you can check out my offerings on my website, yourmagicalmidlife.com. I offer individual and small group coaching, as well as luxury retreats for women in midlife and beyond who are seekers, dreamers, and unconventional thinkers. You can book a complimentary discovery call in the calendar link in my show notes. If you've enjoyed this episode, I'd appreciate it if you left a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or share this episode with a friend. And I will talk to you next week.